Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 16 piano sonatas I couldn't live without. I really can't. I love these pieces. They're absolutely brilliant and fabulous and interesting. I actually think the piano sonata was right up there with the string quartet as one of the media in which composers expressed some of their most personal and intimate and experimental and interesting thoughts. And so, this list came together rather quickly, I have to say. I didn't have to work at all because I just knew what they were. They just popped out. And some of them are kind of contemporary, and it's really an interesting, I think it's an interesting list, and I'm very curious to get yours as well, because, there's so much more to piano sonatas than just like, Beethoven's. You know what I mean? So here we go. Some of these will be very familiar. Some of them will be a little bit less so. Some are iconic. Some of them ought to be iconic. We start with CPE Bach, really the father of the piano sonata. He wrote a bazillion of them, and my goodness, they're incredibly diverse and thrilling. First, we start with his sonata in G minor, Vodkin 65, number 17. That's really helpful, isn't it? It tells you nothing. That's the thing about C.P.E. Bach. He wrote so many of them, and they don't have titles or nicknames or anything like that. You just have to find the right one. This particular sonata is on that wonderful Deutsche Grammophon disc of Mikhail Pletnev doing C.P.E. Bach piano sonatas. And, of course, it's in the complete set with Anna Maria Markovina. If that's her name, it's Markovina's her last name. I never remember first names. And it's just an amazing piece. Absolutely thrilling. So, and weird and adventurous and harmonically fascinating. I don't even know where to start. But you can. Give it a listen. Just WQ 65/17. That's what you need to know. It's like the combination to a safe. It will unlock a world of musical riches. Next, Haydn, of course. Haydn's last piano sonata, number 52 in E-flat major. If you use the other numbering, it could be 62 in E-flat major, but it's usually known as number 52 in E-flat major. And it's the first great concert sonata. In other words, it wasn't written to be played at home. It's a public work. A big, chunky, brilliant public work, right along the lines of the London symphonies and other things which are contemporaneous with it. It's serious piano music, and absolutely brilliant, and musically incredibly diverse in its range of moods and affect. A total work of genius, and you owe it to yourself also to get to know it very well. Glenn Gould made an excellent recording of it. He was going to do the Haydn piano sonatas before he kicked the bucket. That son of a bitch. He went and massacred Mozart, but he really was interested in Haydn, but he never got a chance to do them. Oh, wow. I can't believe it. That was a loss. And next, Clementi, terribly underrated composer, a fabulous keyboardist, or composer for the keyboard, his piano sonata in B minor, opus 40, number 2. Again, one of the problems with some of these early sonata sets is that, they're not identified specifically by something like, they don't live in isolation. They're part of a group, and you have to sort of know the group and know how to navigate yourself around the nomenclature conventions of classical music. But opus 40, number 2 is a major work. It's fully comparable to the early Beethoven sonatas. Clementi he knew what he was about, and he's starting to get a little bit more attention. One of the only pianists who kept Clementi in the public eye was Vladimir Horowitz, who recorded the sonata and who knew it very well and who knew Clementi's value. And, it's very funny. Horowitz had such a reputation as a barn-burning virtuoso, but so much of his best work was done with, music that you're not so familiar with. Clementi being one, Scarlatti being the other. he had a very, very wide range of interests and the ability to really characterize music from all periods. That's what makes a great artist. And after Clementi, well, you got to do Beethoven, don't you? I had to pick one. I picked one by each composer. You don't have to limit yourself that way, but I did. And for me, it's the Waldstein Sonata, because first of all, I adore the piece. Second of all, it has been recorded by just about everybody, and it's a wonderful test of a pianist, because the piece is tricky. It's very, very tricky. The very opening is tricky. It's the opening note is one note, and after that you're in thirds, and so it's there's a slight difference in the way you launch the piece. It should be a single note, and then harmony, yeah, like that. And then there's the question of whether or not you actually hear the rhythm. I mean, is it clear, or is it a performance that tends to kind of blur those repeated notes together? It's not a right way or a wrong way. It depends on the interpretation. And then, of course, there's that finale. It's a rondo, and it's a rondo with the most glorious theme. Da, 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 da. And it comes back, and each time it has greater depth and sonority and a timeless quality to it. There's something about it that seems like it's made of the primal fabric of the musical universe. And it's a tricky finale also, because you got to pick the right tempo. It's an allegretto, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's not quick, but you can't do it too slowly. And then it's got, of course, this wonderful coda. And, oh my God, there's so much there that tells you what kind of an artist you're dealing with and whether they can put the whole thing together. Yes, I know they're the late sonatas and all that stuff, but Waldstein is my pick. I'm looking forward to see what yours will be. Schubert. I know everybody wants to do the last one, the big B-flat sonata, right? But I didn't. It's a sonata in C minor, D958. It was sort of obviously based on, on Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, also in C minor. It has some similarities in tone and shape to some of the themes and ideas in Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, but the Schubert, of course, is different. And the reason I picked the C minor sonata is because it has the moment. It has one of those harmonic things that Schubert does in the second subject. Da 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 da, ba da 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 da. It's going up and down like little noodly scales. You think, nothing's going to happen, and then it goes da 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 da. Bum. Ow! The chord comes in, and I mean, it doesn't mean anything when I hum it, but when you hear it, oh, it just transports you into another world. And frankly, the rest of the sonata I don't care about. No, I'm not, just kidding. But that moment is the thing that sealed the deal for me in that sonata. And, there are often pieces of music where there's just a thing that happens when you're listening, and it just grabs you. And then you're hooked. Well, it hooked me. Chopin, the Funeral March Sonata. Of course. How can we leave that one out? Some people prefer the third, which is actually, in a way, a more sort of cogent and effectively shaped and balanced piece, and incredibly masterful as well. But I just love the Funeral March and the spooky finale. Oh, it's so cool. It's so distinctive. So, by the way, is Alkan, his piano sonata, The Four Ages of Man. Boy, is this weird. It starts really fast and it progressively slows down, which is a very, very difficult thing to bring off, but he does. It starts with a man in his youth, and it's marked, it's one of those typical Alkan, fast as humanly possible pieces. Then there's a second movement called Quasi-Faust. It's all striving, and Satan pops up, and it's written in like 11 parts, and counterpoint at the end, and it's just insanely difficult. And then there's a pleasant domestic interlude. Everything is going, it's almost like a lullaby. It's really attractive. And the finale is an adagio, Prometheus Chained. And it's nothing but skeletal rattling and and bitterness. Ooh, what an amazing work. Really astonishing. A wonderful companion to the Liszt Sonata in B minor. Well, of course, it has to be on any short list. Well, at least it has to be on mine. An extraordinary work of genius that belies those who claim that Liszt was unable to write works at larger structures, that he couldn't invent fascinating and experimentally successful forms, which he did. And he did pretty regularly, actually. The musical content may be questionable sometimes, but his ability to place, structure a piece effectively, place each section in a convincing sequence is pretty impressive. I have to say, nowhere more so than in this sonata, which is, of course, one of the pianist Mount Everest type pieces. Then, after Liszt, Scriabin, his piano sonata number 5. That's a single movement sonata. It's just one movement. It's not long. It's like, 9 minutes, 12 minutes or something? It's not long at all. And it begins with this thing. It begins with an object. The piano's rumbling along. It's going. It's a gesture. That's what it is. It's a gesture. And then the rest of the sonata, which sounds kind of like almost more chromatic Ravel. It's a very forward-looking piece, but not as wacky as his later sonatas. And it ends the same way it began. And it's just, I can't quite explain, why it does what it does or what it is particularly, but it's awfully beautiful and really effective as a complete thought. What he's thinking about is anybody's guess, but he's thinking about it completely. I mean, there's no question about that. Then there's the Dukas piano sonata. Oh, this is so much fun. Dukas, as I pointed out before, he wrote one of everything. And that was it. There's one tone poem. There's early stuff, but aside that he disregarded. But there's one tone poem, one symphony, one overture, one piano sonata, one big set of variations, one ballet, one opera, and that was his output. And this piano sonata is one of the great piano sonatas of the late 19th century. It's a huge, turbulent, expressively profound piece. Doesn't get played very often, because it's very long and it's not easy to penetrate, and it doesn't end with flash and dazzle, as you want things to, generally speaking. It's just a giant, strange hunk of music in the form of a piano sonata, and I think it's brilliant. I really do. Same thing with the Ives Concord sonata. His first sonata also doesn't get enough play because it's a wonderful work and a similar idiom. I mean, it's also tricky and difficult, but the Concord sonata is one of the great piano pieces of the 20th century, and I think that it's another strangely structured piece. It's similar to the Alkan, actually. It really is in some ways, anyway, because it has, it's big things at the beginning, and then it becomes kind of transcendental and spacey at the end, and it has all the things that Ives make. That makes Ives, strange harmony, crazy rhythms, folk tunes everywhere popping out, and obsession with Beethoven's Fifth and the movement, the Alcotts, the third movement, which is all about Beethoven's Fifth, but it doesn't sound like Beethoven's Fifth. Really, really a fascinating work. And it's become quite popular, actually. In some ways, it's Ives' most iconic piece, along with the Fourth Symphony and other things. But it gets played more often because it only takes one person to do it. Well, if you use a viola and a flute, you might have 3 people doing it. It's possible, but most of the time, it's just one person doing it. And I think that it's a great piece to sort of cut your teeth on, too, if you're interested in getting into Charles Ives. Some people have said to me, that my affection for Ives is, born of the fact that I'm an American. And that's such bullshit. I mean, I am an American, and I do have an affection for Ives. And I do have a biographical attachment to Ives because, he was in Danbury with my dad's family. They were in Danbury, Connecticut, and he went to my high school, and he went to Yale, and so we used to do these Ives things. It's not because I'm American. It's because of the fact that as a result of being American, I was exposed to him. I was in a position to know. And there's a big difference between just being in a geographical place that allows you to be exposed to a certain type of music, and insisting on the greatness of that music simply by accident of birth or some sort of nationalist feeling, of which I have very little. I have a lot of patriotic feeling, no nationalist feeling. I only care about the quality of the music. And all of us, from wherever we're from, we're in a position to have some unique knowledge, some unique exposure to certain types of music. So Ives was one of those. And that's why I like Ives. I was lucky enough to be someplace where I could really get to know him. And that was, I consider, a happy accident. And that's that. Next, Medtner. Some people are really passionate about Medtner, who has been described by others, and me as well, as sort of Rachmaninoff without the tunes. All of his music, or most of his music, is very elegiac, and it's all about forgotten this and depressed that and ignored things, and you know, it's very fin de siècle, inward-looking romantic, but very, very beautiful. You have to get to know it. You really do. You have to give it a chance to soak in, and because his tunes are not, for the most part, I mean, he could write a tune, but they're not as voluptuous and immediately appealing on their surface as someone like Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninoff. It takes a little bit more listening. But once you do, oh, he's a very, very rewarding composer. It's taken me a long time because I just didn't have the time to do it. You know, I mean, I followed, thank God, you know, Marc-André Amelin, who recorded all the sonatas, and then, you know, you begin to, and the tales, you know, the Skazi or whatever they're called, you know, you get a wonderful overview of his pieces, thank God, because of modern recordings, where he's finally gotten his due as a composer. And I think that he deserves far more credit than he gets. He's a specialist. He's a piano guy. And, you know, maybe not for everyone, but there's a world there and something definitely worth encountering. Another one who's similar to that, another composer, is York Bowen, the British composer, who actually wrote quite a bit of music in different media, but his piano writing is really effective. He was born to the keyboard, and he wrote 6 terrific piano sonatas, all of which have been recorded. And number 5, I think, is, well, it's the one I picked. It's the one that I think has some of the most meaty bits. I like them all. I really do. He's a joy to listen to. Even if you're, you know, not so interested in what he's writing, I don't know. There's something about his keyboard writing which is so idiomatic and so effective and brilliant. And he deserves vastly more attention than he gets. I think one of the problems with Bowen is that he happened to be an English composer writing in a medium just as a piano specialist. It just wasn't the kind of thing there wasn't really a place for him in 20th century English musical life. I mean, you had Britain doing operas. I mean, they were obsessed about opera composers and big orchestral pieces and choral music. I mean, you know, the English tradition is unique. It's special. And Bowen didn't really fit easily into it. And his style he wasn't a member of the pastoral school. He was more like Walton and those people. You know, that style, more internationalist, and he was a piano person. So, you know, what to do with this very, very fine piano person who doesn't fit into any sort of normal category? Well, what we do is we listen to him. That's what we do. Oh, my goodness. Next, Kapustin, the recently deceased Kapustin, who wrote 20 some odd piano sonatas. I think there's like 22, 23. I don't know. There's a whole passel of them. And just bucket loads of piano music, another piano specialist, but his style was jazz. But he was not a jazz composer. He always said, because there is nothing of improvisation in his music. It's all meticulously notated. And for that reason, all the more difficult to play. It's excruciatingly virtuosic. Try his piano sonata number 6. It will knock your socks off. I guarantee it. I mean, his music is brilliant and wonderfully, wonderfully honest. I mean, he had this style. It was what it was. He was from Ukraine. He lived in Moscow for most of his life. He was the pianist behind, a lot of those Svetlanov recordings where the orchestra needed a piano, from like the Moscow Symphony. He was a composer of solitary genius. He really was. And he played his own music marvelously. He was a tremendous performer in his own right. Happily, Capriccio is doing Kapustin piano sonatas and concerti with Frank Dupree. And they're just amazing. There's really a lot of stuff to discover of Kapustin. There really is. And it's been a recent thing. And I'm so excited that we've had a chance to do that. Also, the Copland Piano Sonata. This is one of the major works of his career, of his early period. It's a very, very intricate and contemporary piece. It's not one of Copland's sort of populist things. It also deserves much more attention than it usually gets, because he was Copland doesn't get credit for it, but he was a composer of a real sort of questing mean in his early period. He was experimental, and he listenably experimental. I mean, he was just interesting. He went to France. He studied with Nadia Boulanger. He had his Stravinsky style that came from that whole experience. But works like big abstract works like the Piano Sonata and also his piano variations and some other things like that are really exceptional pieces to dig into, to get your brain moving. Fabulously intricate and delightful work, I think. And last but not least, Prokofiev, Piano Sonata number 7, one of the wartime sonatas. Those were 6, 7, and 8, the wartime sonatas. They're all brilliant. They're all full of color and passion and spiky dissonant harmonies, and they're very uncompromising. Prokofiev is ingratiating as a composer as often as not because of his wrong note romanticism style, where he writes these beautiful tunes, and there's we all enjoy it, and a lot of his music is somewhat humorous in tone, and he's very lovable. These sonatas are not as lovable. They are formidable. That is the word, formidable. And I like sonatas that are formidable, that are formidable, that have real meat on their bones. And this one, does this one have meat on its bones? Absolutely phenomenal, terrific. And that, my friends, is the conclusion, the end of my 16 piano sonatas I couldn't live without. This was a fun list to put together because I'm not by nature a piano guy. And so I'm much more interested in, not the fact that it's just keyboard music, but that it's music that happens to be set for the keyboard. They're all works that I think are really interesting musically. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to get your lists as well. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.